Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight for the Q&A for the film formerly known as Youngstown, currently known as The Place That Makes Us. My name is Judy Laster. I'm the director of the Woods Hole Film Festival. I'm sitting in air conditioning because it's 90 degrees here in Woods Hole. I'll turn that off in a minute. So tonight we are going to have a Q&A with the filmmakers. We're thrilled about that. The Woods Hole Film Festival, we're in our 29th year. Most years we are an 8-day in-person event that takes place right here in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, where I'm physically located. This year, as you all know, due to the pandemic, in the middle of March, we had to decide whether we were going to continue on or put things on hold, and we decided that regardless of the fact that the world of virtual festivals didn't really exist then, we were going to try to figure out how to make that happen and how to create a virtual film festival that resembles the in-person Woods Hole Film Festival as closely as possible. So this is our third day of the virtual festival. It has gone better than we could have imagined. It's beyond our wildest expectations. That is due to the films that we have this year, which are all so incredible, and to the audiences, which are really, we're so thrilled that we're continuing to get the support not only of the festival, but of the filmmakers who work so long and so hard to get their work made and seen. So thank you very much for being here this evening. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. So basically, we're going to chat for a while. Then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. At the bottom of your gray bar down below, you see a Q&A. If you have a question, please type that in, and I will facilitate the questions with our guests here. And I would also like to say that this could not happen without the support of many people, from our incredible sponsors, to our donors, to our grant funders, to you, the audience. And so thank you very much. The festival runs through August 1st. You can see all the films anytime you would like on the virtual platform until that time. And every film in the festival is in competition. So please remember to vote in the portal. You'll see stars right next to the first page of each film. So the scale is 1 to 5, and we hope that you'll vote, and we look forward to seeing the outcome of the audience awards. So without further ado, let's bring in the filmmakers. If you guys want to unmute yourselves, that would be great.
There we go.
Great. So we have Karla Murthy, who's the co-director and co-producer.
I am director and co-producer.
Director and co-producer. And Jad is the executive producer. Jad, I'm sorry, please tell us your last name.
Abumrad.
Okay. And then we've got Alexandra, and I'm gonna really mess up your name. Nikolchev.
Nikolchev, yeah.
Who is the DP and co-producer of The Place That Makes Us. So let's talk about sort of the genesis of this film. Tell us a little bit of the backstory. How did you come to this particular story? Why did you decide to tell it? I mean, any documentary, and this is a great documentary, any documentary worth its salt is something that people work on for a while. They don't just get made quickly. The stories are complex. They have to be created in the final film as a narrative when it's not always clear what that narrative is going to be. But you also, as filmmakers, then live with this film while it's being made, and then after it's been made. You are the keepers and tellers of this story. So tell us a little bit about the backstory for each of you and what's your relationship to this film.
So I am a reporter for PBS NewsHour Weekend, and back in 2016, I had been sent to Youngstown to do a piece. It was an election year, and to look at Youngstown and see what was happening there. And that's when I originally met some of the main characters of the film. at that point, I had no idea that I wanted to make this film, but I've always wanted to make a documentary, but as you said, it has to be something that you can live with and be, just commit yourself for over, many, many years to get it made. And so I'd always kind of been looking for that project or what that could be. And there was something about being in Youngstown and meeting some of the people there that I was really drawn to. And one of the people that I interviewed for that NewsHour piece, off camera, he was just talking to me about like how much Youngstown has changed and how there's all these young people now that are staying, and their energy is sort of remaking this city, and it's really interesting. And they're not, held or beholden to what their parents' view of what the town was, and they're just reimagining the town. And I was really interested in that idea, and also just that connection to home, which I don't really have. Both my parents are, I'm first generation. My dad is from India, and he was a street kid and brought over here, he's adopted, and my mom is from the Philippines and came here as a nurse. And I spent my childhood, imagining a different life outside of where I grew up. And so I was just really interested in this idea of this commitment to home and what that would look like. And also at the same time, my work makes me have to, parachute into a place, report for 3 days on a thesis that I've already have in my head of what this piece is going to be about, and then leave. And this was a chance for me not to do that, and just to kind of like see what change looks like over a period of time, and to just kind of be there and spend time and see what happens. So that was sort of how it started. In that NewsHour piece, we were showing some of the efforts that Ian and his nonprofit were working on, which was rehabilitating houses. So they showed us a house that they're in the process of renovating, and a house that was finished. And so my initial idea was like, oh, that would be a great backbone for a film, to be able to follow one house as it's being transitioning into a home again, from an abandoned and blighted house to a home again. And couldn't that be, an interesting symbolic sort of, a symbol for the town itself and what these young people were trying to do. So I knew when we left Youngstown on that first reporting trip, those were some of the ideas that were in my head. And then it took like many months of talking with Ian and Tiffany and some of the other people before we started filming in 2017. But it was just a different story than you hear from, the typical Rust Belt, post-industrial, town. Like what are local people who are born and bred, living and doing in that town.
So Alexandra, were you there from the get-go as the DP?
Yeah, so Karla called me up and said, told me about her idea that she had just been in Youngstown to film this piece for PBS, and she was so inspired by these young people in this, in a town that has the reputation of get out while you can, nothing's going on, it's post-industrial decline. Chains don't go to Youngstown because there's no business opportunities. But she was telling this other story. She said, there's all these young people who are actually making a really good quality of life. You can go there. There's parks, there's, the river that's beautiful, and there's these incredible craftsman homes that people are buying for affordable prices. So I had worked with Karla at PBS, and I loved the stories she chose. A lot of them were unusual stories and really giving space for people to speak their truth, character-driven stories, which I just love making, and verite, and that's also my what I love to do. I had just started working with this C300 Canon camera, and Karla said, that's the camera I want to use. So it just felt like everything lined up. And we went, I remember the first weekend we drove there, which became many 7-hour trips to Ohio from New York. We came in on inauguration weekend for President Trump. And, I had done a lot of reporting on immigration before that, and it was just a depressing time for me, just looking at what he would bring. And so to be able to go there and just be inspired by a community who was kind of above the fray of, or below the fray of these national politics, and just like doing the work to, you know, be the solutions to their own lives, was just a wonderful thing to be highlighting at this time when we felt like, my God, what's happening on this national level?
So I don't know who specifically to direct this question to. Maybe Chad, you can jump in here too. How did you find the people to portray in this film, and was it difficult to get them to share their personal stories in this way?
So Ian and Tiffany I had met on that first reporting trip for PBS, and I actually had reached out to Julius for the NewsHour piece because he had just been elected as a councilman, but he never got back to me. So it was literally the meeting where we were at this city hall, and Ian and Julius are there. Julius is presenting his idea. That was the first time we met Julius, was in that meeting. And we wanted it to feel organic, the people that we met, and it took time, like for people to just open up their homes to us and their lives. I mean, we filmed it for, 2.5 years. So it was difficult for me personally because I'm not used to doing it. I'm used to just like, of course you'd want to film with us. We're doing this news piece and, but this was so different because we were going into people's homes and having to talk to people about what that experience. I mean, this is my first feature film too. So I made like a lot of mistakes along the way and learned so much about and respecting the process and what it's like to, have a camera in your house and for, weeks on end. So for the most part, everyone in Youngstown was very open to us because we kept showing up too. I think that was part of the reason why. But yeah, I think it was just showing up, and you just keep coming and talking and learning to be more transparent about the process, and just letting them know that like we're not here to, we're just here to watch and to see and to not. We weren't orchestrating anything. I mean, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but.
Chad, do you want to jump in here?
Sure, I can add a few. I mean, in terms of all the sort of specific film decisions, I'll defer to Karla and Alexandra about that. But what's been interesting to me to watch from the bleachers, not quite the bleachers where the audience is, but maybe a few rungs down from that, sort of on the 50-yard line as they're doing this doc, is, I'm a journalist as well, and there's always a pressure as a journalist because you don't have a lot of time. You go into a place and you've got a template in your mind. You're looking for maybe one surprise or two surprises, but you've already kind of got the story. You have to work that way. What's been interesting to watch is Karla and Alexandra went again and again and again to Youngstown, and a lot of those trips, I mean, I would hear about them afterwards. It was just kind of watching and not knowing what the story was, but knowing it was important to be there and to just witness. And that there is something for me that in the end made a very powerful film about that simple act of witnessing, because what you see, it's a little bit like that Jarmusch feeling that you have when you watch a Jarmusch film. Like whatever it is the characters are doing is one layer of the story, but there's also kind of a dialogue with time that he seems to be having. And I think there's that same conversation in this film. You're seeing the pace at which the world actually changes. There's the change that we as journalists like to construct in our 4-minute pieces, where you have tension, boom, juxtaposition, and hot tape. But there's the way that the world actually changes, which is a slow, progressive, small steps movement towards a better world. And that's the conversation I have when I see this film. It's about what change actually feels like, how it actually works.
So that was sort of my next question, and we actually already have a question from somebody in the audience, which I'll bring into this. So 2 questions, one, and then we'll talk to the audience. So you made this film pre-COVID and pre-economic breakdown of this country. How do you think the film would be different if you had finished it after COVID?
I mean, the housing crisis alone is like, I actually did another PBS piece this year for NewsHour because of and it was all about just the housing crisis and what's going to happen post-COVID. We're going to have another wave of foreclosures. And that's what happened to Youngstown. That's why you have a lot of these abandoned homes too, after the steel mills closed. So it's definitely something I've been thinking about it a lot, but I don't even know. It's just such a huge problem. And YNDC and Ian's group, they keep doing the work. They keep posting houses that they've been trying to, homeowners that they're trying to help. They are continuing to do whatever work that they can. And same with Julius. And so, yeah, that's a really hard question to answer because we haven't gone back. Besides, I was there like in March and April, but it would be completely different. I think certain themes would be the same, it would be just a lot harder.
Alexandra, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think what's been interesting to think about, and speaking to Tiffany and Ian, they have continued doing their work during all this. They've had they've had to scale down their staff dramatically at a place where already jobs are tough. But I think just thinking about the themes that resonate post-COVID are interesting, even though it looks different because everybody's out in physical space, sharing physical space together. This idea of local ingenuity and communities coming together and problem solving, and the sense of resilience that and kind of fighting for what they believe in and being the ones to make the change in their own lives. That's what I feel is going to get us out of COVID, at least in the next couple of months, that are going to keep people afloat right now. Yeah.
Sally Roy is the person, and Sally actually had a film here at the Woods Hole Film Festival last year. Hi, Sally. And we may have already answered this, but she asks, what's the Youngstown situation with COVID? And she's also congratulating you on the film. I guess if you haven't been back, maybe, do you keep in touch with the folks who were featured in the film?
Not as much right now. We all checked in, like, are you okay? Is everything okay? And then I was there right in March, right before everything shut down. And yeah, I just talked with Julius, but I'm not exactly sure how it's affected them locally. I can imagine.
Well, now that we're coming up on election season, or we're already in it, certain places always get sort of held up as examples of good or bad, whichever side of the conversation you're on. What's good about America, what's not good about America. And a place like Youngstown, I feel like, and I could be wrong, is always on that list of places that people want to claim as one or the other. Why do you think Youngstown is that place?
There is a history of that for decades. There's this, I can't remember her name, is NPR reporter who's from Youngstown and has talked about this a lot, just decades of politicians every election year coming to Youngstown since LBJ, since, the war on poverty and the mills. And it was just always been this iconic town. And it's not just Youngstown, it's a lot of these, old mill towns become this backdrop for politicians to kind of espouse whatever they think their worldview is and to sort of take the temperature on, how people are feeling. And we actually wanted to include some of that in our film. Like there was more of it in it. We kind of pulled and pushed that theme in. But we knew we wanted it to be a backdrop. And Youngstown is a really interesting place because it is actually, a lot of people don't know that it has been mainly Democratic. And the surrounding areas have become more conservative. And then that sort of has, shifted. And it is kind of like it has become this poster child. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not exactly sure why that has happened. But in terms of our film, we did want to include some of that idea in the film, and how the politics sort of bubbles up. That is the context. That is how this city has been, I mean, they feel used, frankly, by politicians. And this film was supposed to show, like, okay, so what are people doing on the ground despite whatever promises are made? Despite these politicians coming in and having convention or whatever, these speeches, what's really happening on the ground.
And I think that this film really does that very well. And, many places get used for whatever purpose somebody has to use it for. And nothing is ever constant, right? Change always happens. And so what I like about this film, and I think we may want to talk about this, is it really shows the complexity of any community, whether it is facing difficult times, whether it is on the way up, whether there are always people trying to bring change when situations get hard. And so I think this film really does that very well, and also is coming out at a time when I think people probably need to remember that we don't live in a place that has divides, right? We're not all thinking one thing, and we're not all refusing to change. So do you think, well, kind of interesting, now that the film is coming out just pre-election season, but also in a more virtual world, how do you see this sort of being part of that narrative of trying to change the conversation?
We had always kind of imagined, we wanted ideally this film to come out in an election year to energize and to legitimize and to just shed light on people in their own towns, and local activism, this is like all things local, and to kind of inspire people in their own communities. But the virtual thing, I mean, I'm still trying to grapple with this whole idea of virtual film. Like, I don't even.
We're all grappling with that.
Yeah, so that part, I don't even. I mean, what's exciting is that, like, I have friends now who would have never been able to come to Woods Hole, who can now watch the film, and I have a friend in Virginia who was able to watch it. So that's pretty exciting that everyone can be a part of it in some way. But it's just, it's different, I hope that, like, because this film is sort of a quiet film, I hope that when people are watching it at home with their headphones on, they'll like feel this like inspiration, and that it'll affect them in this personal way that, I don't know, maybe it's different than if they were to be in a big crowd at a theater. I don't know.
Maybe you can get it on PBS NewsHour. You might know somebody there.
And I think just to jump in about the election question, I think also part of it that we wanted to really explore, what do people need? What are the needs on the ground, and what are people doing about it? And going back to what you were saying about people are more complex than we think, beyond politics, what are the basic needs people are looking for, and giving voice to that. And also, I think in the end, I think what shines in this film is the homegrown talent in these little communities, in communities across America, in communities that are maybe overlooked, that there is a lot of pretty powerful homegrown talent that we should consider investing in when we think of fixing these areas of the United States as a national government or whomever.
We have a question or a comment from Zara Katz. Congratulations on a beautiful film. She'd like to know if you shared the film with the people in the film and what some of their thoughts and reactions are.
We have, and it was just like one of the scariest things to do. And I think what was difficult was that I had come to Youngstown and done a news piece, and this was totally different. So I think that was like different for them. But I got great feedback. Like Julius had just watched it earlier 2 weeks ago and really loved it. And we've gotten really great feedback, and Ian too. We actually went to Youngstown earlier and showed some like snippets of what we had been collecting to Youngstown, to people, to residents there, which was also really scary. But like, yeah, we've gotten really positive feedback so far. So yeah.
And I think, sorry, I think when you make a film and it's, you always have in your head, what are the people who are going to watch it going to say? That's kind of like, as you're making it, and that's kind of that's how I feel like we keep honest about what we're portraying, because we care about the reactions of those in the film, and to portray them in authentic ways. And I think there was a lot of, oh God, you're not going to just make another film about rune porn, basically. So we wanted to make sure we didn't do that, and really talked about the wonderful community that's there.
So oftentimes, especially with documentary films about sort of more social issues, filmmakers have sort of a whole impact strategy associated with the film. So after the film comes out, there is a hope or an intention to use that film to affect some sort of change or to create some sort of dialogue. Is that your strategy with this film?
I mean, we had an impact strategy that's sort of like thrown out the window. I mean, we originally, we wanted to show this film in small towns all over the country and have it be this, have discussions about how communities can help themselves. And with, Ian's group is a community development corporation. And there's a lot of these CDCs all over. And so we could have had panels and discussions about how CDCs can be invested in again and help communities. I'm not really sure what our impact plan looks like right now. Honestly, I'm hoping that maybe virtually now we can kind of reach a lot more people, and but I'm not really sure. That was originally our goal.
I would imagine maybe some things about a virtual situation make that actually easier to connect people
Right.
who are geographically disparate. Jed, do you want to sort of talk about your role as the executive producer and sort of how you looked at this project with regard to the need for this film to be made? At what point did you say, "Oh yeah, I want to jump in here and be part of this"?
Well, I mean, I was de facto involved because Karla and I are husband and wife, and so I would hear a lot about her trips and help her. I was always a sounding board to help her think about how do you tell this story, what's the beginning, middle, and end. She would play me the beginning, edit again and again. What do you think? Down to, I'm also a musician, so I help her sort of think about the music. But at the end of the day, I think I really was just sort of like a cheerleader at the end of the day, just trying to help. I mean, as you know, Judy, making a documentary is so hard. This is, I don't know, 3 years, is that right?
2017, January.
Just 3 years that Karla and Alexandra have been going and fighting and working and trying to raise money to make this film. And to make it in a way that I think it had to be made, but also doesn't make it an easy sell, to be honest. It's a very small, quiet, beautiful, poetic film. And at the end of the day, you just need people in your corner to cheer. And for me, what I have been so impressed by is, you think about some of the scenes in this film, Ian looking at his dad's sort of ID badge on the wall. And for me, it's a meditation on just young people trying to kind of move out of the gravitational pull of the ghosts of the past in some way. And that is what we're seeing all around us right now. It's young people trying to sort of carry forward what matters, but also discard what doesn't. And there's something about that I find very powerful and moving about this picture.
Well, I also think in a way, and audience, please feel free to type questions in the Q&A. in a way, this film is coming out at the perfect time, not just because of the election issues, but because of the pandemic. More people are staying put, and more people are going home and reconnecting sort of by living with their families. And so the narrative has always been, when you're young, you go to college, you get a job, you move out of your small town. That narrative is going to change. And so I think this film actually provides some, not a roadmap, but it makes people maybe feel more okay about that, because it's the expectations of upward trajectory to get somewhere. You can see that you don't always have to go somewhere. You can be somewhere when you're right where you are. So I think in some respects, this film has a timeless element to it as well. And because maybe it did get filmed prior to COVID and prior to the election, it stands on its own 2 feet, regardless of when people see it.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so, are you guys working on anything right now? Any new films?
I have a project I've been sort of working on off and on with hopefully with one of the musicians for this film, actually, which is about like my father, who worked at a gas station, and the musician who I work with, his father also was a gas station owner in Texas. And so we've been kind of exploring like immigrant stories, and yeah, so that's sort of on the back burner, but I'm not, yeah.
Alex, what are you working on?
I've been filming with some kids, and I'm based in New York City, so I've been filming with some kids, high school students who are using restorative justice practices to change their schools from within, working with the DOE to kind of combat high suspension rates in certain schools. So I'm following them, and they're still doing the work during COVID. And it's also one of those, okay, let's explore what happens and see over time where they get with these solutions that a lot of adults have been like, it's too hard to solve race in schools or discipline problems in schools.
Yeah. So another question is the weight of telling a story in a feature film different than news, and if so, how?
Well, the whole process is completely different. The weight of just having to be there for so long and to develop relationships with people, it's just very different from a news piece. And when I'm researching a news piece, so this actually grew out of a piece from Judy, who I worked with Bill Moyers for many years. She had just started a production company, and she was the one who actually asked me and knew Ian and his work, and asked me to do a piece with NewsHour because I had already been working with them. And so you go in with like research, and you know who you're going to talk to, and you know your questions, and you've pre-interviewed people, and it's, that's it. You have your 3 days to shoot. With the film, it's like we had no idea what the end would be. You have no idea what the beginning is going to be. In fact, we changed the beginning a million times. I had that little structural backbone there that I knew I wanted to have, which was one house. Although we had to film many houses, we didn't know what house we were going to end up with. So that gave us some sort of structure. But beyond that, like, you have no idea what your story is going to be, and how you're going to like multi-character documentaries those are so hard. I don't think I'll ever do one again. But just because you have to weave these stories together, and make them rise and fall together, and make them so they resonate with each other symbolically, and that it's a house of cards every time you change it. So it's just completely two different beasts. And they, not to say, I've done a lot of news pieces, and every time I start one, it's difficult and hard. This is something that has kept me up at night for many years. So. And
not to delve too much into the sort of your personal work style, but do you think this has changed you as a journalist?
Definitely. the process of, I mean, it's changed me more as a filmmaker, I think, actually, not necessarily as I feel like the journalism stuff is all still there, and that part hasn't really changed, but what I've learned more is just about like the power of filmmaking. I mean, this whole process is so different because with the news piece, I can write myself out of anything. I have to explain and give context to everything. And this, as a filmmaker, was a chance to do that, to not necessarily force feed, all that information to people, but do it through visuals and poetically. And I really wanted to give space in the film where there are these quiet moments where people could come to with their own ideas and reflect on what they were seeing, and resonate with the film personally. And you just don't really do that in news. So, so I don't know, not necessarily as a journalist, but I feel like since this is my first film, there was a lot that I learned, and
Somebody says, congratulations. How did you get the funding for the project?
The funding. Well, that was really difficult. We got some, as I said, Judy, doctor from Public Square Media, she first gave us some help, and then, we got a few grants. There's so many filmmakers right now and all doing really great work, and we're all competing for the same amount of grants. It doesn't seem to be like this huge pool of money.
That's always
yeah. And so at the end of the day, it was like finding people who cared about the film and about the issues, and a lot of private donations. Women Make Movies is our fiscal sponsor, so they were super helpful in facilitating that. We put in a lot of our own money. It was truly a labor of love.
As most documentaries are too.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think it's so interesting that I would say maybe over the past 10 years, and people in the audience feel free to chime in about this, seen a big shift, particularly at film festivals, over the kinds of films that are sort of celebrated and really are the breakout films of festivals tend to be feature documentaries. And that's because I think there's so many great stories that are being told, and audiences love stories about people and places that they either want to go, can relate to, have some sort of connection to. And I think that's why documentaries, you just can't get enough of them. It is too bad, though, that they are so hard to get funded.
Yeah.
And maybe over time that will change, because stories, especially like this film, they really have the power to change lives. And that's why I will be interested to see sort of next year what the path of this film has been, and whether or not people come to you and say, seeing that film made me think a lot more about the nuances of the conversation that we're having nationally about all these issues that people claim divide us, and that really the divisions probably aren't as stark as they are presented to us. And maybe the people who are portrayed in a film like this, or who see a film like this, will start understanding that there needs to be a different dialogue and a different narrative that we live with in this country, and how we think about ourselves. And so that's why I think this film and many of the films at this festival have the opportunity to change all that. So thank you for making it. I don't know if you want to sort of respond to that in any way, or sort of.
I mean, I hope all of those things will happen. And I mean, it's funny because we talk about this film as being a social issues documentary, but at the end of the day, it was really about those people that we filmed with and their journeys. And, I had started it thinking it was going to be like very social issues driven. And while it does have that, it's also just watching people. It was really important to show just people living their lives. This is sort of an anecdote I've told before, but a long time ago, I produced an interview with a refugee from Somalia, And, you know, we like asked him all these hard questions about what it was like there. And then he mentioned that he had gone back to Somalia, and, you know, we asked him, what did you find there? Thinking he was going to, again, describe the violence, the chaos, and all of this stuff. And instead, he was just like, you know, I saw people falling in love and getting married and going to the beach and families. And so that sort of became something that I really wanted to show in this film, that places like Youngstown, who are supposed to be the poster child for post-industrial blight, there are people living there, living their lives and having families and building home. And so it was really meant to be this meditation of what is home, and just show people living their lives. And I think that, in a way, does more to change people's minds of these places than anything. That they, and to just recognize what home is for many people.
Well, we talk about hearts and minds, you know, and as we are supposed to affect other countries that we may be having conflicts with, I feel like we need a Hearts and Minds campaign in this country so we can start to feel good about ourselves again. And so stories like this, I think, are critical to hopefully changing the narrative and creating that opportunity. But so we have a couple more minutes. If there are any further questions from the audience, this would be a good time to chime in. If not, I'm going to give you guys sort of the last word on the film. What you see, where is it going over the next? Do you have other festivals on the docket? What's the rollout?
I don't know. We're kind of slow. We'll see about. I'm not sure exactly where we'll end up. But you know, we changed. I do want to mention that, like, we had a last minute change in the title, which I hope didn't cause too much confusion. But we did really want people to think about the places that make them, and to go into the film with that in mind, as opposed to, we're going to tell this definitive story of Youngstown, Ohio. So yeah, I just wanted to clear some of that up. Just that, like, we went back and really thought about, like, all of our characters and the emotions and what the journeys that many of them went on, and who they are and who they're trying to become. And how we're defined by this country, this place that makes us. And so I hope that we leave people with kind of those ideas in their minds.
Well, Bruce Springsteen's, you know, song "Youngstown" just keeps rolling through my head. I'm sure you thought of that too. But
we did. It cost a lot of money to license that. So we did get a little mention in there. The dad mentions it. So yeah.
But maybe he'll get the opportunity to see it, because I really think they are so simpatico, and, you know, his music is all about weaving and telling stories. So I think you guys did a great job. So for the audience, just remember that all the films in the festival, and we have 187 of them, are on the platform streaming through August 1st. And we hope that you'll get a chance to see a lot more. And also remember that you have the opportunity to vote. So please vote early, vote often, but only one vote counts. So thank you guys for being with us tonight, and many congratulations.
Thank you so much for having us, and for doing this and organizing. I know it probably wasn't easy to suddenly put this on virtually, so we're super appreciative to have this opportunity.
You are most welcome. This is why we do it, for this very purpose. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. No, it feels great having the film in the world, and this is a great place to premiere, so thank you.
You are most welcome. So good night all, and we hope to see you at other Q&As, and enjoy the festival. Bye-bye.